Om Shuklam Varadaram Vishnu Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasanna Vadanam Dhyaye Sarvavighnopashantaye Ishvaro Gururahmeti Murtibheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyaptadehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, so we were looking at chapter 15, which, as I said, really encapsulates the whole teaching, which essentially is so showing the connection between the cause of everything, or Bhagavan, and that which is manifest, which in our experience is ourselves, and the world that I experience. For which it started by giving the example of the Srishti of the Jagat as the Samsara Vriksha, the tree of symbolizing life, the metaphor. And he calls it Samsara Vriksha, not just Jagat Vriksha, because I don't really experience the Jagat as Jagat. I experience the Jagat as Samsara. So Samsara is in terms of my experience. Jagat, animals also experience the world. And we experience the world. So that is one kind of sensory experience. But the other is in terms of my whole interpretation of the world and my relationship with the world and the world's relationship with me, etc. So it's at a totally different level when it comes to the human being. And in that experience, since I see myself as an individual, which is a small part of the whole experience, I see myself as being very limited and suffering many things in terms of my limitation, whether it is in terms of mortality, in terms of knowledge, in terms of happiness, in terms of life experiences, everything I experience as a very limited entity, which is not acceptable to me at a core level. I always seem to seek the opposite of this particular experience of mine, which is what is called as samsara experience. So this was all described, and then was also described the means to get over this particular samsara experience, the life of limitation, the life of unhappiness, and so on. So tataf padam tat parimargitavyam. In the end, he said, how? By removing this, cutting down this tree of ignorance, and then reaching a point from which there is no return. So this point of return is a point where you want to be, where I don't want to be. So I want to be free from all these kinds of limitations. And that is the point I'm seeking, and from which there is no coming back, because the whole samsara experience is one of coming back, really speaking. So whatever positive thing that I experience in life, it comes to an end. So I come back to my original state. So what is my original state, really speaking? It's all about the equilibrium. In physics, we see there is an original state, which is the state of equilibrium. Anything that goes, when you go away from that, you tend to come back to it. So here, the life of samsara seems to be that state where I seem to be coming back in spite of all the little attempts that I make at getting out of it. So is that my true state of equilibrium? If it is, I should be comfortable there, but I'm not. So obviously that's not. And then the state which I'm seeking, is that also a true state of equilibrium? Because if once I am there in my true state, then I will not or I should not come back out of it. So these are the kinds of questions that remain unanswered for the jiva. So here he says that by by removing this tree of ignorance with self-knowledge, and you recognize yourself in a way that you get to a point from which there is no coming back, because that is your true nature, that is your true swarupam. So there is no coming back out of your true nature. Having said that much, then he goes on to talk about more specifically the connection between the Jagat Karanam, the cause, and the Jagat, and the cause from which we have all come, and the individual. So we look at that. And that's from verse 7. Mamaivaamsho jivaloke jivabhutas sanatanaha manashthashthanindriyani prakritisthani karshati. So, mama eva amshaha jiva loke jiva bhutaha sanatanaha manashashtani indriyani prakritisthani karshati. So, who is this jiva? Really, the connection in the next couple of verses is the connection between me, the individual, and the Lord who is understood as the cause of everything. So here he says, who is this individual, the jiva? He says the jiva who sees himself as a separate entity. So is mama eva, is my amsha. The one that is it's a tricky word which is understood in many different ways. So what do you mean by amshaha? Amshaha means a part. One simple meaning is amsha is a part. So this individual is, first of all, is not something different. That's the one important point. So between the jiva and the Lord, are they two different, of two different characteristics, or they are similar? There are two individuals who are similar to each other, or they are the same. So they are the same. So for example, like heaven, so there can be two things which are distinct from each other, totally different. Or there can be two things which are like each other, but then they are different characteristics. Or there can be one which is a part of the other, like a hand is a part of my body. So when the Lord says this jivaha is my amsha, so is this individual a part of the Lord? Is the question. So if he's part of the Lord, then what part is it? What part is it? So it is a small part? Is it a big part? Is it an infinitesimal part? Whatever it is. So this amsha is interesting. Okay, we have to understand that. So here he says again, what do you mean by the jiva here, the individual? The individual is the one manashashtani indriyani prakritisthani. So this is the individual who's composed of, put together of this particular indriyas and the mind. Okay, so all the different indriyas, the jnanendriyas, karmendriyas, etc., along with the manaha, is this shashtani. This is the individual. Okay, and this individual he's been put together in the sense that all these different things come together and form an entity called as the jiva. Okay. This jiva, he says, jiva bhutaha. Jiva bhutaha means he is the one who is bhuta, is born, jataha. So it is that part of me. It is a part of me. It is my amsha, but that has come into being. Okay. That has come into being. So, in other words, the jiva, the individual that has come into being, is not outside of the cause. obviously. It is not outside of the cause. It is not independently come into being. Okay. The jiva, the individual, is not born independent of me. In fact, it is born of me alone. Well, is it like, there can be like any birth, really speaking, like the mother saying, say this is my amshaha. So this child is born of me. It is my amshaha. So is it something like this? Is it something like there is? So our father, and then out of which gave birth to all of us, all the beings. And then all the beings now became individual entities, like any mother gives birth to her amsha and father. So it can't quite be that way here, because in that case, there both the amshas are limited, one coming out of the other. When we talk of the Lord, Bhagavan, Brahman, we're talking of the infinite, because here jivas, etc., is all in terms of infinite. There is no finitude here. So, in terms of time, space, everything, all of this is part of the srishti that was talked about. So, the cause of everything is in terms of infinite. So, the infinite, that means what is a part of an infinite? So, either the infinite has to break itself up to infinite parts, okay, or it is not infinite. Here, Bhagavan being infinite, the part itself, Amsha, cannot stand independent of the infinite. It is always part of the infinite, unlike any other birth. A mother giving birth to a child is always separate from the mother. It's not the same. Whereas here, suppose the mother was infinite, then the child itself is not going to be outside of the infinite. If it is not outside of the infinite, then why are you calling it an amsha? Okay. Because infinite is only one. So the jiva, in fact, there should be no jiva. There should be no jiva because the cause, original cause, is infinite. Like space, like space. So space is infinite. But then in space also, what happens is, so I create a particular space. There is the infinite space. And then suppose there is a room or there is a pot. So when the pot comes into being, the pot space is an individual space. It's a limited space. That limited space, in comparison to the infinite space, can be called, it is like an amsha. It is an amsha of the space. At the same time, it is not really separate from the space. Okay. When I understand that, then I understand also the nature of creation. I understand the nature of creation, because creation is not something that comes out of nothing. It is really something, the creation itself means coming into being. Coming into being doesn't come out of something which is not there. It can only come into being out of something that is something that is. If that is true, then this coming into being is not a sense, it is only from a, if I take the walls of the pot to be the reference point, then the pot space comes into being. Really speaking, otherwise, then it becomes an amsha. So that amsha becoming an amsha, the pot space coming into being in the infinite space, similar to that is the jiva coming into being. Because he says this jiva is something that is also coming into being, but is already only an amsha of the infinite Lord. So really speaking, cannot come out of nothing, has to come out of that which is the infinite alone, for which he'll say, see, avidyaya kalpitaha bhagaha is amsha. So the word amsha means, so that is the part, and that part is kalpitam. It's a kalpitam part. It's not a real part. The part space is kalpitam. Kalpitam means, so it is a perspective. It is a perception. Okay. Really speaking, there is no part space. We've seen that. We've analyzed that before. Really speaking, there is no such thing as a cause. After all, what is pot space? Pot space is the space inside the pot. Well, there is no inside or outside. Inside or outside is relative to the wall of the pot. But then, even where the wall is, it's not that the wall separates the inside space and the outside space, really speaking. It doesn't separate it. Because where the wall is, there is space. So even where the wall is there, there is space. So really speaking, if space is on both the sides of the wall, and also in the wall, there is no true separation. But at the same time, there is a separation. Okay. So there is a separation in terms of my experience. There is a separation in terms of utility. There is a separation in terms of an entity, a namam, a rupam, a function, etc. There is a separate entity, pot space. But in reality, there is no true separation. That is what is called as kalpitam. So kalpitam doesn't mean imaginary. Kalpitam is that which takes on a particular reality from a certain reference point, not which is not itself. Okay. So in fact, that is all, everything is like that. When I define anything in the world that is connected to the world, I never define it in terms of its own reference point. We always define it in terms of some other reference point. You can think about this and talk about it also later. So if that is true, nothing is defined from its own reference point, only from another reference point. Therefore, it becomes kalpitam. So that means it is something that my mind makes happen because based on experience and so on. Also, Jivaha Bhutaha, this Jivaha Jataha is born. Jiva, any individual is born. The birth, therefore we can never establish birth. Even the birth itself coming, when did the Jiva come into being? We can never establish. Because I can only say coming into being in terms of time, in terms of space. And when I try to do that, it again becomes arbitrary. Okay. So I have to take a reference point in time. I have to take a reference point in space. Only then I can talk of the birth of a jiva, birth of an individual. In fact, the individuality is born only later on, after the physical birth. When I'm born, this minute, the second that I'm born, I don't recognize myself as an entity. The entity, the ego, only manifests a little bit later on. When I'm born, I'm just a being that is existing, and then just existing and living. But I'm not a self-aware full. So again, it depends on where I want to establish the birth of. That's why we cannot really pinpoint, and there is so much debate about it. So the birth itself cannot be defined from its own standpoint, from the jiva's standpoint. It's only from different reference standpoints. That's why all it becomes kalpita. So even when he says mama amshaha, the individual is a part of me. The part of me, really speaking, is not distinct. It's not different because it's the same cause. So characteristically, it has to be the same. But that means then why is it not Bhagavan? It is an individual. But that individuality that is brought about, which looks different from the cause, is what is kalpitam. Because I look at it from the different reference points, and that itself is the nature of jiva. So the jiva is not different from me, Bhagavan says. It is my amshaha, but at the same time, he is kalpitam. He is born at a given time and place based on the reference point. So Bhagavan becomes akarta, abhokta, and so on. Jiva takes on an entity which sees itself as doesn't recognize what it is because he sees himself only from various reference points and then ends up being limited from any reference point that I define myself. Prakriti sthani karshati. And all this that makes it happen is what is called as prakriti. So prakriti becomes, there's a function. the capacity, the limitations, the characteristics, nama rupam, etc. That is all what is called as prakriti. Okay, the one that has different qualities is prakriti. So prakriti becomes the cause. It's a twofold cause. That from which jiva comes is really the essential cause, the essential nature. But that from which defined as an entity, that becomes another cause. Okay, the various reference points. That is what is called as prakriti. Okay, so therefore there is a purusha and there is a prakriti. Prakriti is where therefore becomes maya, rupam, etc., which we'll see. Shariram yadavapnoti yachapyutkramatiishvaraha gridhitvaitani sanyati vayurgandhani vashayat. So shariram yat avapnoti yat chapi yat cha api utkramati ishvaraha grihitva etani sanyati vayuhu gandhani iva ashrayat. So what does the shariram, what does the jiva do? Shariram avapnoti. So the jiva takes on a sharira. I take on a individual body, that's an individual birth. So whatever it may be, so say it's a human birth, then it becomes a taking on a human birth, a human form. Yat cha api utkramati, or gives up. So at one point, the jiva gives up the individual body or takes on an individual body. Is what happens. Grihitva etani. At that time, this jiva, the entity, there is an entity here, like the pot space entity. Like the pot space takes on a particular pot form. So here also the jiva takes on or gives up a particular form. Etani. Etani is the, what do you mean by etani? Etani is the, so mana, shasthani, indriyani, all which he says. What am I constituted of? I am made up of the senses, the particular mind, the particular body, and so on. In other words, the upadhis. The various upadhis which help me function in the world, the nama rupas. This entity takes on this particular identity. Then sanyati. And so he takes on. When he gives up, what does he do? So he moves on to another similar state, which is what he says. Like even Vayuhu Gandhani Iva Ashaya. So like the Vayu carries the Gandha. Gandha is the fragrance. So like even the Vayu carrying the fragrance of a flower, this Jiva, the entity, so takes on and gives up and continues. So its own course. Their fragrance is really karmas. Okay. In a subtle form, what happens? The flower is there. I smell the fragrance here. So the fragrance moves on, even though the flower is somewhere. So here also, the jiva is, when he takes on a body and then he gives up a body, that means there is an entity. There is an entity that moves on to the next state of manifest. So next body, one can say, but that body need not be a body that we define as a body. So one name and form is given up, then another name and form is taken on. This is what happens to the individual. Like even a pot, for example. So a pot, so you make a pot and then out of clay, so unbaked clay, you make a pot and then the pot breaks, falls apart, and then you again take all the clay together and make another pot. Okay, something like that. So it is just from one form to the another form. The jiva moves on. This is the Lord of the jiva. But the one who's doing this, the one who's moving on, essentially really is my amsha. It is just myself alone, not different from me, not distinct from me. Says. So, having mentioned this, this manashashtani, indriyani, etc., the jiva that he talked about, he elaborates a little bit more about what the jiva is constituted of. Shrotram chakshusparshanam cha rasanam ghranameva cha adhishthaya manaschayam vishayanupasevate. So why do I do this? Or why does the individual? What's the purpose really? These different nama rupams. So he says, Shrotram Chakshuhu Sparshanam. These are all the different senses. Okay, so Shrotram is the hearing, Chakshuhu eyes, Sparshanam the touch, Rasanam smell, Granam is what is Granam? Eyes, nose, tongue, taste, tongue. So all these five senses, he says, Adhishtha, Manas, Manahacha, and also the mind. Behind all of this, there is the mind. He says, Adhisthaya, Adhisthaya, all these things. So having established, having settled where? In the body. Okay. So, Dehastaha. So all these different senses, including the mind, that is centered on this Upadi called as the body. He says, getting them all together, Upasevate, Bhunte. So he experiences the world of objects. So that the whole point of the jiva's life is to experience the world. Okay. So otherwise there's no point to being born. So there is he puts all these things together like even you create a dream, So the same individual, I create a dream world. What's the purpose of the whole dream world really? What's the point? The point is to experience things. What kind of things? Things which I want to experience. Okay. So things which I want to experience, that I need to experience, which I'm not able to experience in the waking state, for which I create a dream world. Okay. And then why do I need to experience all this? Because of previous experience, right? So in the waking, there are certain kinds of experiences which are incomplete, which are unfulfilled, that need me to complete the experience, which I cannot complete it in waking. So I create a whole dream world. Exactly the same thing for the jiva. The jiva also, why does he create the waking world? Well, because of, again, other experiences, previous experiences which were experienced, which were incomplete, which caused this person to again need to create new, which is all what is called as karma. Okay. So in other words, the purva karmas, which are previous experiences remaining incomplete, need to be completed. It's all part of the law, the infinite law. And so the person recreates the jivatvam, in order to experience the world of experience, whatever it might be. So he says, so Vishayan upasevate. So all these things become the Indriya. The Indriya's mind becomes the instruments of experiencing the world. Utkramantam sthitam vapi Punjanam va gunanvitam Vimudhananupashyanti Pashyanti jnana chakshushaha. Okay, so now this is true now for all the jivas. Okay. So in terms of where they originate from, why they are born, and then what is my connection with the cause, and So the life that I am experiencing. But in all of this, there are two types of jivas. Okay. So what are those two types? So he says, while going through all these experiences, utkramantam, sthitam. So utkramantam is that once coming into being as an entity, as an individual, or remaining as an individual for a period of time, experiencing the world, bhunjanam. So experiencing the world. Then gunanvitam, through the different gunas. So we all have different qualities, etc., through which I experience the world. Sukha, dukkha, etc. All of these come under the different different types of life experiences. In this, there are two types of people, two types of jivas. Vimudhaha na anupashyanti and jnana chakshushaha pashyanti. So there are two types of people. So one are the Vimudaha. Vimudaha are the people who don't know, who don't recognize this whole thing about themselves in terms of the origins and the experience, etc. So they are my Amsha and all that. They don't experience, I mean, they don't recognize all this. It's like even a pot space that thinks that I am a individual entity, unconnected to the infinite space. Whereas jnana chakshushaha pashyanti. So what is it that makes some people know this and not know this? Well, it is in terms of ignorance, right? So there are some people who are ignorant of nature on their own connection. Why? Because they look at themselves from the various reference points. They do not know themselves. They do not recognize themselves from their own standpoint of this Swarupam. Whereas Jnana Chakshushaha, there are other people. See, it's Anupashyanti. So, because Anupashyanti means see. Some people see and some people don't see this. Okay, see, they see their origin, others don't see their origin. What do you mean by seeing? Well, this seeing is not a physical seeing. It's not seeing through their eyes, but it is through their knowledge, eye of knowledge, jnana chakshusha. So some people by knowing, by recognizing who they are or what they are, they through their jnana chakshu. That means for which is different. It's a different kind of seeing. You all know that. So even though we use the same word for it's all in terms of sight. So physically also I see, and so I sight is in terms of, it's a cognitive sight, it's a recognition, it's not a physical cognition. That is what is called as jnana chakshu. So jnana chakshushaha pashyanti. So these are people who have self-knowledge, who see the truth about themselves and others don't see it. Okay, a little bit more about such people. He says, yatanto yoginaschainam पश्यन्त्यात्मन्यवस्थितम् यतन्तोऽप्यकृतात्मानः नैनं पश्यन्त्यचेतसः. So it says yatantaha, yatantaha, the one who are yatis, who do yatnam. Yatnam is prayatna. So the people who effort, abhyasa. This is what is called as abhyasa. So the people who put in the effort to know themselves, it involves many things, but they do a lot of yatnam, a lot of tapas, etc. They do. Yoginaha, who are also yogis. Yogi generally, when they use the term, they are into upasanas. They do dhyanam, meditation, pranayama, etc. So the ones who do a lot of practices, spiritual disciplines, and a lot of uh, meditation and so on, he says, Pashyanti Atmani Avasthitam. They Pashyanti, they recognize this where Atmani, in themselves. So they recognize this, they gain this self-knowledge within themselves, in their This is not something you find outside. It's all Bhagavan. So in terms of my source, etc., I come to recognize not outside of me, since they are my Amsha. They are not outside of me being infinite. So when they recognize me in themselves, because I am their very Swarupam, he says. Avasthitam. So Swasyam Buddhau Avasthitam. He says Yatantaha api. Okay. There are others who, even though Yatantaha, means they do a lot of effort, they do a lot of things, but he says they are Akritatmanaha. If they happen to be Akritatma. What is Akritam? Akritam is, so here Kritam is Samskrita. So, the word Samskritam means, so Samskritam of course is grammar. It means that which is well done. Samyak Kritam is Samskritam. So grammatically also this is one grammar which is well done. That's why they tend to use it for computers. So that is Samskritam. But then Samskritam also is in terms of, so like Samskara. When we go through Samskara, so Samyak Kriyate, Yena Karmana, it is called Samskara. Samskara is a ceremony, correct? So it is a karma. It is a karma by which one is, so Samyak Kriyate, one is purified. Okay, it's a purificatory ritual. All the samskaras are purificatory rituals, and for which I purify myself. For what purpose? Well, as a preparatory to the next phase of life, okay, to the next stage of life. So the different samskaras that we go through, which are the sacraments, are so rituals and prayers, which are all purificatory in nature to prepare me for the next stage of life. That is called samskara. So he says they are asamskrita atmanha. Here atma. So the one whose atma here is manaha. Okay. Samskritam. Atma is always pure. Atma doesn't become impure because it is its swarup. It's like gold. So does gold ever become impure? Gold doesn't become impure. There may be impurity in the gold. Okay, but gold doesn't become impure. Gold is gold. Gold cannot be impure. The impurity we put in the gold, then we call it impure by virtue of not the gold, by virtue of the impurity. So just as gold itself, Swarupam cannot be impure. Here, Atma Swarupam, he says, cannot become impure. Asamskritam. But really speaking, Atma is also used for the mind. So here, one's mind is asamskritam, means it is not matured, it is not purified, it is not able to. What is the mind which is not mature? Real, even psychologically speaking, we all talk of maturity. Maturity. You're more mature. You should be more mature. We are not mature. Even children, we tell them, oh, you're more mature. Now, when they have a problem with the younger sibling, what do you tell them? Your brother is only 2 years old. You're 4 years old. You're older. You're more mature. You're 4-year-old. Not mature, but we tell them as though. So, what do you mean by mature? Mature means so that you are able to see things which the other one is not able to see. Basically, that is maturity. So maturity is being able to see facts with minimal, less distortion, less projection, less misunderstanding, misperception. So a person who is able to do that compared to another person becomes more mature than the other person, right? That's a simple understanding of maturity. So here he says, so that means a mature mind. There's nothing to do with good, bad, and those kinds of things. It has to do with understanding. So a mature mind is a mind that is able to see things without distortions, without projections, without misrepresentations, and so on. Okay. One needs to have this kind of a mind in order to know oneself. To know mathematics, you don't need this kind of a mind. To know any other subject, you don't need this kind of a mind. But to know oneself, one needs to have this kind of a mind, because I'm trying to see the nature, my own swarupam. So I should be able to have a mind that is able to see things for what they are, not see things from my own personal subjectivity and biases. Now, if that is true for maturity, then do we have the capacity to do that in terms of life? Does my mind have the capacity to see things as it is? Or my mind puts in its own twist or its own take on everything? This is my take, this is my take. People say that. So I have my own opinion. That won't work here, because I'm trying to find the Swarupam. It's like a researcher's mind. It has to be very precise and objective and able to see things which it doesn't want to see also sometimes. So that kind of a mind is required to know oneself, which is what is called as a adhikari. An adhikari's mind, a mind qualified to know itself. Well, he says a person may do a lot of effort, yatantaha, but if he is akratatmana, if he has a mind that is not a mature mind, is not able to see things easily for what they are, what will happen? Na enam pashyanti achetasaha. Achetasaha also is the one aviveki. So because he doesn't have the insight in order to recognize the truth about himself. So it's not enough to do the effort, just simply do tapas, etc. It's not enough to just do dhyanam even. Nothing is going to happen unless I gain a certain maturity, inner maturity, so that I'm able to see things for what they are without my own distortions. So this whole thing is centered around adhikaritvam, the self-knowledge. Okay. Having said this much, so the in between, in terms of the jiva and the karanam, Ishvara. Now he talks about the connection between Ishvara and the Jagat, or the world that the jiva experiences. Yada dityagatam tejaha jagat bhasayate khilam yachandramasi yacchagnau tejo vidhi mamakam. So he says, Yat adityagatam tejaha jagat bhasayate akhilam yat chandramasi yatcha agnau tat tejaha vidhi mamakam. So when you look out, what's the first thing that is the center of my whole experience? It is Aditya, Surya. Why Surya? Because without Surya there is no world, really speaking. I'm not going to perceive anything without there being a light, their source of light. So it starts with Aditya. So it's not just light, it's not just the sun, but it is the tejas in the sun. Okay. So there are two things in the sun that makes my experience possible. One is the light, and the other is the warmth. Okay. So the light which makes the whole world available to me, Adityagatam Tejaha, the Tejas that is abiding in the sun. There are a lot of suns out there which may not have the same kind of Tejas. They say no, our own sun at some point is going to lose all the Tejas. So the Tejas is what keeps the whole thing going. It says, Jagat Bhasayate, Akhilam. Akhilam is the entire Jagat, the one that lights up the whole universe. Yat Chandramasi. Also the Tejas that is there in the moon. Okay. Moon also has Tejas. The sense, moonlight keeps us going when the sun is on the other side of the other side of the earth. But the difference is, so the moonlight is borrowed light. So moonlight is borrowed light. Sunlight is the original light. Yatcha Agnav. And then there is the other local light. When both are not available, the Agni. Agni also has Tejas. Okay. So these are the three different sources of Tejas for us. He says, Tat Tejaha Mamakam Vidhi. Mamakam Vidhi. You understand that Tejas, which basically is that which gives you life and that which makes every experience of yours possible. He says that is nothing but my expression. Okay. So I express in the form of Tejas that keeps you alive. So the very life principle itself, Bhagavan is not separate from, distinct from that principle, that law that keeps me, what makes it possible for me to live, to sustain, to experience the whole world. This is Ishwarasya Vibhuti. It is Maya. This is what is Maya Shakti. You know, the possibility is Shakti. We can only do what we can do for us to do. What is potential for us to do? That is all. Beyond that, one cannot do. That potential itself is an expression of the how we understand the Lord. So the Lord manifest is in the form of all that is in the realm of possibilities and laws. Okay. The same thing also expresses in the form of laws that makes things possible for us. Okay. In fact, it is cognition. Earlier on, he said, "Natad bhasayate suryaha, na shashanko na pavakaha, yadgatva na nivartante tadhama paramam." So, says there he says, what is there in the sun? What the sun itself doesn't light up. That means there is a light which is also beyond the sun's light, and that is myself. That he said earlier on, that is my swarupam. Here he said, this is my expression. So the same expression, cognition, consciousness is the first light, that makes everything possible, which is myself. But then, even the light that the object of my experience also, it is because of my cognition alone, my awareness. But at the same time, that which makes it possible for me to experience it. Like even the dream, So dream also, there are two levels. There's a cognition. I cognize the whole dream. That is the rupam. That's my nature. But there is also an experienced dream that is cognized. That where does that Shakti come from? That Shakti also comes from the same cognizer, the same cause, the same origin. He says that is true with respect to the world is what we call Bhagavan. The Lord, with respect to ourself, our own individual standpoint, we call it the Atma or oneself. So he says, okay, so Gama Vishyacha Bhutani Dharayamyaham Ushnami Chaushati Sarvaha Somo Bhutva Rasatmakaha. So this is just in terms of cognizing. But not only that, I have to also keep going. I have to also keep going. It says, Gam Avishya. Gam Avishya. Gam is Prithvi. Prithvi. So he says, Gam, I enter the Prithvi. I enter the earth also. Bhagavan. There is the Lord in the earth. How? In what form? In what form? I mean, is it the physical earth on which I'm standing? Or what is it? So here he says, Bhutani Aham. He says, Ojasa. Ojasa is again the Balam. the strength, Shakti. So he says, there is Shakti in the earth. There is a certain potential in the earth. There is power in the earth. What kind of Shakti is this, he says? It is a Shakti that Pushnami Aushadhi. Aushadhi. So Aushadhis are the plants. So in the earth, I exist. I enter the earth in the form of that particular potential, that particular Shakti. What does that do? That gives life to the Aushadhis. That gives life to the plant. Okay. So this is all where we recognize divinity in our tradition. So when we say Prithvi, so Prithvi is also, so Devata. So as a precise, when I say I enter the earth, we recognize that in the earth there is power. What makes you say that? Because there is life, it's life-giving. Life-giving, all the plants that come out of the earth are because of that life-giving capacity that is there in the earth. In fact, all beings then sustain because of that Oshadis, plants. Even the non-vegetarians, mostly non-vegetarians also then end up eating the fellows who ate the plants alone for the most part. So ultimately, the life comes from the plants or the life extracted from the plants. So therefore he says, Oshad Sarvaha Oshadi Pushnami. I nourish it, I make it alive. Somo Bhutva. Rasatmakaha Somaha Bhutva. By being what? Soma. What do you mean by Soma? So some people say alcohol. It's not that Soma is alcohol. The reason they say is because people who drink alcohol, for them it is Soma. That's all. It's not because alcohol is Soma. For them, that is their. So Soma means essence. Okay, that which is the rasa. So that which is the rasatmakaha somaha. He says so he says somalata. There is a creeper. Actually, soma is not that God sat there and got drunk. There are better things to do. So there is a somalata, a particular creeper called somalata, which is very mentioned in Ayurveda, and it's a medicinal plant. So which supposed to have this life enhancing, so promotes well-being, growth, etc. This particular herbal plant called soma. So they used to use that a lot in Ayurveda. It's described there. It says Somo Nama Oshadi Raja. It's called Oshadi Raja. He's the Raja of all the different herbal medicinal plants. Panchadasha Parnaha. And just 15 parnas, leaves. So it is 15 leaf. It's a bunch of leaves there. So it's not what you're thinking. So he says, Sa Soma Iva Hiyate Vardate. So like the essence of something. So the very core, the life-giving essence. So this Somalata creeper was used in medicine. So he says for anything, any plant really that gives life. Not all plants we can eat. There are certain plants which are edible, which we eat that become source of life for us. So he says through this capacity, these plants as Soma. Therefore, Soma Devata. Soma Devata, Chandra is worshipped. Chandra is supposed to give life to the plants. Yeah. In Ayurveda, some medicinal herbs, they will pluck only in the night time, or they will pluck when there is full moon and so on. So that is a presiding deity. So as Soma is Chandra, so moon is the presiding deity for Oshadis and for these medicines. So anyway, so he says Somo Bhutva Prasatmakaha. Okay, so this is all. So he gives life, and then he gives life through all this. So food, what becomes a food for us? then that's itself also not enough. So I can't just because I eat a plant, which is full of life, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be nourished. Okay? There are some other things also that are involved in the process. Food is food only when it is convertible in my body into life for me. Otherwise, it's not food. So for which he says, Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha Pranapana Samayuktaha Pachamyannam Chaturvidham. So Aham Vaishvanaraha Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashritaha. So not only I am the one that abides entered the earth and created this whole sustenance mechanism. It's not enough. Then praninam deham ashritaha aham Vaishvanaro bhutva. So in the individuals, prani is any being. So in the individual being, he says, in them, deham, abiding in their body. In what way do you abide in my body? This is all Bhagavan. So as Vaishvanara, so in the body I am called Vaishvanara. Therefore we have so many forms of Bhagavan. So Prithvi is also Devata. Then Vaishvanara is Devata. So the same infinite Lord in my body, in this particular form, is called Vaishvanara. What form is that? So he says, in the one Upanishads, it is this Vaishvanara is described. Okay? So he says, so I am Agnihi Vaishvanara. Vaishvanara is the fire. What fire is this? Yaha asmat. No, yaha aham purushe antaha. That which is in the Purusha, in the person's body. And what does this fire do? He says, idam annam pachyate. So by which the one that cooks the food. So in our body there is a fire. This fire is the one that cooks the food. You can't just simply eat the plant. The plant has to be, even when salad, if you eat salad, to cook it. And another word for cooking is called metabolism. Yeah. And medicine is called that's really cooking. Therefore they say we burn the sugar. We burn I had a kid one time, a patient, little kid. So he was diabetic, juvenile diabetes he had. So then he's trying to explain to me. So what is wrong with him? There's something wrong in my stomach, he said. What's wrong? So there is a fire. There's a fire. He thought there was a fire in the stomach, everybody's stomach, that burns sugar. And then his doctor told him his fire is put out. This fire is not burning in his stomach. So his body is not able to burn the sugar. So he has to take this insulin. So it's all true, because it is Vaishvanaraha. So he says, as Vaishvanaraha, Agni, I am abiding in your body. Doing what? Metabolizing the food. Only then it gives life. Okay. So that capacity is again Bhagavan. Prana apana samayuktaha. Along with pranapana, means along with Vayu. It's not just the alimentary, the digestive system has to work with the Vayu system. Also, the circulatory and the breathing, oxygen, etc., is all needed for the energy to go around the body. Anyway, so he says, Chaturvidam annam pachami. So the 4 types of food is what I metabolize. What are those 4 types of food? So, food can be classified in any way. So you can say veg or non-veg, or we have traditional classification, which is these four types of annam. So Bhojyam, Bhakshyam, Choshyam, and Lehyam. This classification is based on the how you take in the food. It's not what you take in, it's how you take in. So that which you drink is called bhojyam. Bhashyam is that which is chewed. So either I drink the food or I chew the food. Or choshyam, that which is sucked, like mango, etc. Or when you take the drink from the straw. That could be drunk also. But choshyam is that which is sucked, and lehyam is that which is licked. So, because different creatures are there. He's talking about all jivas, we should remember. So not all jivas use fork and spoon. So there are so many animals, the primary mode of intake of food is by licking or by sucking or by chewing, etc. So it covers all the jivas, really speaking. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishtaha matta smritirjnanam apohanam cha vedaisya sarvairahameva vedyaha Vedanta krit veda videva chaham. Okay. So I keep this jiva going, but ultimately also he says, Sarvasya cha aham hridi sannivishtaha. I am also abiding in everyone's hridayam. Hridayam is buddhi, always here. Hridayam is the cognitive, the thinking capacity, the knowing capacity, the buddhi in which all knowledge takes place. He says, Aham, I am abiding in that. As the Atma. Mattaha smritihi. From me, this is all. I am the one who sustained all this. What? Smritihi. Smritihi is all that I remember. Yeah. Cognitive. It's not just perceptions. I don't live just by perceptions. It is also in terms of memory is very important. Totally incapacitated. We know what happens to people when they get strokes or amnesias and things like that. So he says the capacity for memory is nothing but my expression. Says jnanam. Jnanam is what I know. Smriti is what happened in the past that I remember. Jnanam is what I know. And apohanam. Apohanam is also the capacity. Suppose we only had the capacity to know what is in front of us and to remember everything that we experience. Life would be a disaster because we'll be remembering so many things which we should not be remembering. So he says, Mattaha apohanam, even the capacity to forget, we should not look upon forgetfulness as a deficiency. Yeah, especially at our age. So we think because we forget certain things, we think, oh my God, we get upset, we get frustrated, we get angry. It is Bhagavan's blessing. So we have to take it as I take it as a blessing. If I forget something, you say, I forgot. So Bhagavad Kripa, I forgot. So things I should, unfortunately, we remember what we should be forgetting. We forget what should be remembering. That's where the problem is. The problem is not in forgetfulness and memory. So the problem is in what we forget. That is our business, not Bhagavan's. Bhagavan made it so that we remember the right things and we forget the right things. So we only got mixed up in the process. It's not his fault. Cleaning. You have to clear, you have to clear the cache, clear the cache. So forgetfulness is again Bhagavan's vibhutis. So better to forget things. Apohanam cha. Vedaihi sarvaihi ahameva vedyaha. Sarvaihi vedaihi. There are different Vedas that come down to us. Different knowledges. He says ultimately, he talks about Pramanam here. What are they all trying to talk about? He says Aham alone is Vedya, to be known. all the different types of spiritual knowledges, etc. Where do they all lead? They don't not supposed to lead me to different ends. It is Bhagavan alone that is the end in terms of what all that is to be known, all forms of knowledge ultimately lead to me alone. That is how it should be. The ultimate purpose of growth is to recognize what is my Swarupam. Aham Vedanta Krita. Vedantam here now he talks about Pramana. Elsewhere he said, we have to know. For knowing, I have to have a means of knowing, of knowledge. A knowledge that takes me to knowing myself is what is called as Vedanta. That's the subject matter of the Vedanta Jnanam. The particular Vedas, it is self-knowledge. So he says, I am Vedanta Krita. Means where did this knowledge come from? Where did it start from? It has to start from, so either I can say it started from that which is the source of everything. So since the source of everything is Bhagavan, this knowledge also started from Bhagavan, from the Lord alone. Or knowledge has to do with facts. Knowledge has to do with facts. Ignorance, error has to do with ignorance. Correct? Knowledge has to do with a fact of something which is there. The opposite of knowledge is error. Ignorance or error. Ignorance just means not knowing. But really speaking, or I know erroneously. Okay. That is not knowledge. So error is born of my mind, which doesn't know. Knowledge is pertaining to the fact which exists. Okay. So that means which precedes which? Tell me. The fact of something way precedes my erroneous conclusion about it, right? So because the knowledge has to do with the fact, and fact always remains with the vastu, with the object. So he says, all knowledge means true knowledge of Swarupam is the knowledge that is connected to its fact, which has to do with Swarupam. I may not know the atomic weight of gold, okay, but the atomic weight of gold is with gold. Okay, that is its Swarupam, whether I know it or not. So that knowledge, which is the knowledge of oneself, which is in fact the fact and the truth of myself, also what does it have to come from? It comes from the Vastu, original Vastu, which is Bhagavan. So he says, I am the Vedanta Krit. I am the one, the originator, the source of all knowledge, which is fact, factual knowledge. And Veda, also the one who knows this now. Yeah, the subject. Knowledge doesn't exist in the air. Knowledge also abides in a being. Can only abide in a existing being. It doesn't abide in an object of knowledge. It abides in a being. So I am Vedavit, the one that knows, who essentially is also just myself there, my own expression. So thus he talks about, so Bhagavan and it's Bhagavan's relationship with the individual and the relationship with the world of experience. And the next few verses will talk about the Bhagavan itself from its own standpoint, not in terms of the world and the experiencer of the world. So we'll see that next time. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om